Welcome to the Heal Your Hunger Show, where we get to the heart of why you overeat and how to stop. If you struggle with food and weight like I did, welcome home. Welcome everybody to the Heal Your Hunger Show. I'm so glad that you've joined me here today, and you are going to love my guest. Ben Greenfield is a biohacker, human body and brain performance coach, ex-bodybuilder, Ironman triathlete, professional Spartan athlete, anti-aging consultant, speaker, and author of the New York Times bestseller, Beyond Training, Mastering Endurance, Health, and Life. Ben is the man responsible for maximizing performance, recovery, fat loss, digestion, brain, sleep, and hormone optimization for so many different people, CEOs, extra amazing ultra endurance competitors, and a wide variety of athletes, as well as poker champions. I thought that was interesting. So Ben delivers.
But I personally kind of suck at poker. I'm just saying, you probably win a lot of money off of me.
That's great. Ben delivers total human optimization in the fastest, cleanest, and safest way possible. I love that. And you reside in Spokane, Washington with your wife and
Kazakhstan, Spokampton.
That's awesome. Well, I resided in Seattle for a long time. So, well, not a long time, but a significant time in which I met my husband. So that's what.
There's a lot of traffic and a lot of Starbucks over there. Too much of that for my personal taste.
Gotcha. Well, welcome.
Good sushi, good seafood.
That's
we're here to talk about food, so.
That's true. We can talk all about it. It's great to have you. Thank you for being here, making time in your schedule.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, it's cool. And for those of you who are listening and not watching, Ben is currently walking as he talks. So he walks his talk. So that's good.
I'd also go stir crazy if I had to just like sit in front of a computer all day. So I had to like rig this treadmill up to the standing desk. And I'll usually walk like a good 4 or 5 miles a day while I'm I even do like voice dictation for some of my articles, and I talk on the phone. I'll just, I'll either wander outside and walk up and down the driveway or walk on the treadmill. And I'm one of those guys who does really well with like I compete with myself. So I wear this ring that counts my steps, and like every day I got to get 10,000. Like that's always my goal. And, and like I always thought that fitness trackers were silly until I started using one. And I was like, this is actually really motivating to get my 10,000 steps in, because I like to look at the end of the day. And I've even like gone for a walk after dinner to like make sure I get my 10,000 in. So
that's so funny. I do the same thing, but I have a lower bar. Mine is 5,000 steps minimum. So, but I usually hit like 7,000 or so.
Yeah. Once I went horseback riding and I got 28,000, and I'm pretty sure it was counting the horse.
I always wondered how they do that. My goodness. It's kind of cool. So, well, good for you. I saw you, at Paleo FX this year, and loved your talk. And for the people who don't know you, I just want to say Ben is not only all the wonderful things I said about him at the beginning, but his talk just, you really wrapped in so much heart. And that's just what I love about you, is it's not all about the numbers and the stats and the research and the science, although you totally master that. It's really, you weave that in between, really the threads of love, and you recognize how important connection is, community is. And, for me and my audience of emotional eaters, that is like the cornerstone of making all the other stuff come together is the love and the heart, and really coming from that place. So one of the things I love about you.
Well, thanks. I mean, like, it's like kind of the whole yin yang thing, right? I've had to teach myself that, being very, very yang and like this masochistic athlete, out doing all these crazy extreme events. I've realized, more and more in the past couple of years, that you have to have good balance of yin and yang. And then some people are the opposite, right? Some people, I think, do too much, I guess, like yoga and kale and watercolor, shall we say, and sometimes need to pick up a barbell. And then there's guys like me who need to go out and like pick up a paintbrush and get in touch with our emotions and make sure we include things like love and life and family and relationships sprinkled into all this, like, biohacking and fitnessing.
Yeah, no question. Well, you do a good job of balancing both, and I love that. So you cover a lot in your best-selling book, and I want to talk about some of these cool things that you've discovered that can really help people. And one of the things you talk about is the 40 high-calorie, nutrient-dense meals that won't destroy your metabolism. Will you talk about that? That sounds really good.
Yeah, and I hope I'm not like getting too basic here, because in that particular chapter, what I'm getting after is this fact that, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I really wrote that for a very active population who needs to eat a lot of calories.
Those of us sitting around doing
right. Because I come from the background of like, bread and peanut butter and trail mix and 2% milk and fat-free yogurt and basically calorie dense foods that allow you to just like fuel the body, like sports gels and sports drinks and all these things that I would like to think a lot of people now recognize as Frankenfuels. But, that particular chapter is just based around how could we achieve keeping our appetite satiated with nutrient density and also admittedly calorie density, right? Without actually doing damage to our bodies by like, eating handfuls of trail mix or bowls of cereal and milk or, some of these things, bread with nut butter spread on top of it. So I talk a lot about some of these things that kind of fall into that category of two questions that I ask myself whenever any meal is placed in front of me or any meal that I'm preparing. And that is this nutrient dense and is this digestible, right? So you take like quinoa, for example. Well, I mean, I'll ask you, Tricia, is quinoa nutrient dense?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's chock full of like amino acids and fatty acids and minerals. And it's a great little, super grain, whatever you want to call it. But is it digestible?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in its native form, no. It's got a soap-like irritant covering it called saponins that need to be rinsed off.
Okay.
Quinoa needs to be, you got to put it in a glass mason jar after you've rinsed it, right, through just like a basic, kitchen sieve. And then preferably you leave it in that jar overnight, like soaking in water and maybe a little bit of vinegar. And then you rinse it again in the morning. And even in South America, in some populations, they'll use that soap like water that they've rinsed the quinoa in for cleaning clothes because it's so high in this digestive irritant. And a lot of people say, I want to eat healthy and I'm going to switch from whatever pasta to quinoa. And they wind up with like pieces of quinoa in their crap and a tummy ache. And they're like, oh, these superfoods, they don't do so well for my tummy. And the fact is you have to render them digestible. Like you have to render these nutrient dense foods digestible. Same thing with bread, right? Like bread can spike your blood sugar higher than that of a Snickers bar. But if you get your hands on bread that's been fermented, right? Like last night, my dinner was some lamb, or some local organic lamb that I had with a little bit of yogurt that I kind of turned into a tzatziki, right? Like I put some cucumber and mint and things in the yogurt, and I roasted some carrots and some onions in olive oil and salt, and I had a couple slices of bread with the lamb, which is great. I kind of dipped it in the sauces that came off of the lamb as I was roasting it in the oven. But that bread was sourdough, was fermented bread, right? So I took a wheat that normally would kind of like attack the digestive tract, and we even hear about how wheat can, a lot of those proteins when they're extremely concentrated and the gluten hasn't been pre-digested by the enzymatic processes that occur during sourdough fermentation. A lot of those can cross the gut-blood barrier and wind up, attacking thyroid tissue and causing neural inflammation and all sorts of issues. But, a nice, slow fermented sourdough bread from a non-GMO wheat, right? That's nutrient dense and digestible. So that would also fall into the category of something that could technically be undigestible, but that could be rendered digestible. And we could look at everything from, fermenting milk and doing yogurt and kefir instead of regular milk, or, taking a kale which has a lot of like goitrogens in it that could damage the thyroid, and instead cooking the kale and discarding the water. But then there are some things that we just can't render nutrient dense no matter how hard we try, right? Like say, we'll take sugar. Is sugar digestible?
I don't know. I just know it's poison to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, it can, but your body, I mean, like you start digesting sugar as soon as it touches your lips, right? Like you make salivary amylase that causes sugar to begin getting digested as soon as you freaking like practically sniff the stuff. But the problem is that it's not nutrient dense. I mean, unless you're literally like chewing on sugar cane, or I mean, we could maybe say like raw honey or blackstrap molasses, things like that are sugary, have some amount of nutrient density to them. And there's a time and a place to use those. For example, upstairs while we're talking, I have a pumpkin baking in the oven because I love pumpkin this time of year. Uh-huh. And one of my favorite things to do with that is I'll put a little bit of sea salt and a little bit of olive oil and some blackstrap molasses or a little bit of raw honey on it, right? Like, and that'll be my starch when I have dinner. Uh-huh. But ultimately, in most cases, sugar does not fall into the category of being something that's nutrient dense, although it is digestible, right? So it doesn't satisfy the criteria of those two questions. So I say, sugar, no. So ultimately, those 40 meals, what I tried to do is choose foods that were nutrient dense, that were digestible, and fall into the category of what I just described, and that also don't taste like cardboard, right? Like the chocolate avocado pudding in there, right? Like it's cacao and avocado and some coconut milk and a little bit of vanilla extract, and you blend that up, and it tastes like freaking chocolate pudding, and it's amazing. And I'll sprinkle some coconut flakes in there for a little bit of crunch, and it's great, and it doesn't spike the blood sugar, and it satiates the appetite. So yeah, that was kind of my reasoning behind that chapter. Well,
that's a good test for foods. I love that. Very simple, nutrient dense and digestible.
Yeah, and preferably tasty.
Yeah, well, of course. Let's talk about gut health, because that is such a hot topic right now. And it's something I've struggled with, SIBO and other issues. And so it just seems like everybody's got some kind of gut thing going on. Is that just because we're more aware, we're waking up to the intelligence of the gut, or is it literally, are we just like in the process of self-destructing?
That's a really good question. It's multifactorial, really. So we can look at environmental variables, right? Glyphosate, excuse me, frog in my throat. Glyphosate is a perfect example, right? Like it's in a lot of crops and a lot of produce, and it was designed, of course, to harm the exoskeleton of insects and to act as an herbicide and as a pesticide. But the problem is it does the same thing to the cell lining of your gut. And frankly, just because of, Monsanto, not to sound like an alarmist, but it is true. We get exposed to a lot more glyphosate now from our produce than we used to, even our organic stuff. Like I have 8 raised garden beds outside, and I grow most of my own vegetables, but I still take this supplement. My kids take it too. It's called Lignite. It's made by a company called Restore. I interviewed the doctor who made this on the podcast because it helps to almost like protect the gut against glyphosate. And I take a shot of that before every meal, even the meals from the organic produce in my garden, because glyphosate, I know it sounds unfair, but it just like gets spread everywhere now. So that is one issue that I think is a huge one when it comes to gut. And I think the growing gluten insensitivity that we see and the growing prevalence of celiac, a lot of that is related to glyphosate causing the gut to become far more sensitive than it is that people are all of a sudden, magically becoming allergic to wheat. So that's one issue. That's a big one. Another one is this idea behind the gut-brain connection, right? When we're forming in the womb, we've got 2 branches of the nervous system, the enteric nervous system, right, like our digestive system and our heart and our gut. And then we have our central nervous system, our brain. And there's a nerve that wanders between the two called the vagus nerve. And those 2 branches of the nervous system, of course, wind up being, when we're humans, our entire brain and nervous system and spinal cord, and then our enteric nervous system, right? Like our gut, our digestive processes, and this vagus nerve, vagus stands for wandering. It wanders through the whole body. And the fact is, when you have a tummy ache and when you take a bunch of antibiotics or when you get food poisoning, everybody knows this. not only does your gut hurt, but like you can get depressed, you can get irritable, you can get moody, you can get angry. And that's because there's a brain gut connection. Well, there's also, an information flow both ways, meaning that when you are stressed, when you are running away from the lion that's jumping out from the email inbox in your computer, when you are constantly stimulated, as we are more and more in our era of the Internet of Things, and this need to constantly work and constantly be productive and constantly keep up with the flow of information and constantly feel like we're in like fear of missing out FOMO mode, because we just are bombarded by way more than we ever would have been like 100 years ago. Basically, technology has evolved faster than humans have evolved, and especially faster than the human gut brain has evolved. What this means is that our gut is constantly stressed if our brain is constantly stressed. So that's another biggie as well. It's just like we get way more stressed. And I'm getting stressed out by things like glyphosate directly into the gut, but also that gut-brain connection is causing some issues as well. And I would say if I could name one other thing that comes to mind when you ask me that question, it is just this idea that we are exposed to a much wider variety of foods in a much more calorically dense and even, dare I say, hedonistic form than we have been in most of human culture, meaning our ability to be able to grab just about any food from anywhere on the planet by wandering in the supermarket is unparalleled. And again, I think that people are just shoving so many things into their gut that it's inevitable that they're going to run into some issues. And that just returns this concept of simplification, right? Like I'm a big fan for this reason of eating locally, right? Not only do I believe that in about a 10-mile radius around everybody, you could find just about every medicine that you'd need, right? From like, if I look around me on my land, I've got I'm looking out the window right now. I can see, what do I have? I've got lamb's wool, which can be used as a poultice for injuries and muscle aches and sprains and strains versus like ibuprofen or me having to go and buy like Tiger Balm at the grocery store. I've got mullein, and I can dry those leaves and I can consume those when I have an upper respiratory tract infection. I can sip the tea and it's great for upper respiratory tract infections. I've got Oregon grape growing out there. I can dig up the root of that Oregon grape and shave off the root, and that deep, deep yellow color can be used to kill off just about any gut bacteria or gut infection that I might have. I've got wild nettle, which is great as just like a nutrient dense source, like a plant-based source of protein. And the seeds are great for testosterone and libido in both men and women.
What is that? What was that?
That's wild nettle.
Nettle with an N.
There's mint out there as well, right? Like perfect digestif. Perfect topping for my Moscow mules in the evening. But that's another example of a plant. So I could, if I wanted to, eat maybe 20 different foods/herbs from around my land as our ancestors might have. And all of a sudden, when I'm not going to the grocery store and not walking out there with 30 different things in my cart, the gut has a little bit more of a simple array of foods thrown at it too. So I think a big part of it, in addition to stress, in addition to glyphosate, is just this fact that sometimes we just need to simplify, right? Like, and just like have those staple foods in your diet. The other thing I like about that is it eliminates a lot of decision-making fatigue, and it makes seasonal eating fun, right? So what I mean by that is, I'll have pumpkins, right? Like I mentioned earlier, and squash right now this time of year. And I'll eat the hell out of those for like 3 months, right? Like, and then I might not have a single pumpkin all summer long, but in the summer I might be doing some melons and, a little bit more of some of the fruits and some of the things that'll grow in the summer, a lot more of the kale or bok choy or Swiss chard that's growing out in the garden. And, whereas in the winter, we have very few of those greens around. So it's all like underground tubers and roots and some fermented vegetables and things like that. So kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but those are some of the reasons that I think that people seem to be experiencing more gut distress now than it seems they may have in the past.
Well, it's a great answer. I loved, I'm glad you included everything because all of it's so, right on. And, God, I mean, I love the tour of your backyard, by the way. That was great. You know, and the simplicity is so golden, you know. I mean, that's really what we should be aiming for. But also it just makes me think of how, you know, emotional eaters trash their bodies with like the most, when somebody's on a tear, you know, binge, it's not with, you know, nettle root, you know, it's not with nettle or mint or any of those things. It's with, you know, ingredients that one can't even pronounce. So it does, you know, it makes it so much more obvious why we end up having problems, because I mean, there's foreign substances in our bodies. It's just, we're not meant to eat that stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, a big part of it is like, not to have that stuff around, right? Like, so for me, I go on binges. Dude, I'm a freaking athlete. Like, I gotta burn a lot of calories. I'm hungry every single night. Like, I wander into the pantry every single night, stroking my chin and turning around saying, what should I eat? But when it's freaking like, when I don't have, because there's not upset, like I don't have Snickers bars, I don't have packaged foods, and we don't even go to Costco much anymore, or anything like that. So when I'm wandering around the pantry, it's like there's a jar of almonds. And it's like, oh, I'm going to binge on almonds. And like, you get one whole handful into almonds and you're like, okay, almonds are kind of boring now. I think I'm good. And there's not like all these fun, shiny, foily, chocolatey covered things to unwrap. And so that's my strategy is I know that I'm going to wander into that pantry, but I also know that there's no way I'm going to get in my car at 10 p.m. and drive to the grocery store, right, and buy the junk food or buy the hedonistic food. So I just don't have it around. And by not having it around, you know, yeah, I'm still going to grab a handful of stuff at night a lot of times, but it's far, far less than what I'd grab if it's how it used to be, you know, back in the day when I was a teenager, when I was a young bodybuilder, when I'd wander into the pantry at night and there would be peanut butter Captain Crunch and the big box of granola bars from Costco, and not the almonds, but the chocolate covered ones. And all of a sudden you can binge as long as you wanted to. And as soon as you get tired of one food, you turn to the next flavorful food. And all of a sudden it just becomes this exciting adventure in the pantry.
I've had many of those. So tell me about the hacks that you recommend for your poker champions and tennis champions, motocross competitors. What are these more brain hacks, or, I mean, or are they body? Well, I guess not for the poker champions, but the physical athletes, those are more physical, I mean, body things, but I'm sure you've got a lot of brain things for everybody.
Oh yeah. For cognitive performance, I could certainly name a few. And this would just be to like banish brain fog or to think more quickly during the day, or, you know, whenever you need to. You know, you could chunk things into supplements, you could chunk things into food, you could chunk things into like biohacks or gear. I would say some of the things I've been using lately that are kind of interesting that seem to really move the dial for me. One would be this concept of what's called, is a big word, but photobiomodulation, meaning that your mitochondria respond very, very sensitively to light that is either in the infrared spectrum or in kind of like that laser spectrum. And when they do so, they enhance their neural activity. You upregulate activity of something called cytochrome C oxidase in mitochondrial tissue, which just basically means you're amping up cellular activity, you're amping up the production of energy. And so two ways that'll do that, like you could see like this light back behind you. If I reach back, I can flip this on, but it's like a bright red light, right? Like it'll shine that, and I'll just like all like, if I'm not talking to you and I'm just like talking on the phone stuff, I'll take off my shirt and I'll expose my skin to this for collagen production. But it's also great for just like wakefulness and enhancing your mitochondrial activity during the day. Another one is one that you wear in your head. There's this company called Vielight, VIE Light. I interviewed them on my podcast, fascinating podcast. And it's this device. Let me see here. I'll grab it. You wear it on your head. Just a second. And it looks like this. Sorry for those of you who aren't watching the video, but it's like a cup of coffee for your brain. You put it on. And again, it was originally developed for Alzheimer's patients, but it works fantastically for like jet lag, for increasing blood flow to the brain, for increasing cognition, focus. And you put like one little probe goes in your nose and then the rest goes on your head, and you flip it on and it just bombards. I'll leave it on for a little while here. Feels so good. I'm just going to leave it on. It just bombards your body with this cognition enhancing red light. So that's another kind of interesting one. Oh, I just realized I can't wear headphones while I'm doing it.
You've got too many things going on your head.
There's too many things going on in my head, but you know what? I'm going to try anyways because I can still hear you. Okay. So that's an example too. Is this concept of what's called photobiomodulation? Photobiomodulation. And you just got to make sure that you place it properly on the head. There we go.
Oh, interesting. But that's a different effect than the red light you turned on. Yeah,
this is a different wavelength. Or how about this one? This is another cool one, aromatherapy. So this has been diffusing the whole time we're talking, right? Do you know what's in this diffuser that just sits on my desk all day and diffuses?
I would love to know.
Rosemary. Rosemary is great for cognition. It's great for memory. It smells wonderful. The other two that I like to diffuse that are also really good for cognition, and you could also just take the essential oil and smear it on your upper lip if you wanted to, peppermint and cinnamon. So peppermint, cinnamon, and rosemary are also very, very kind of like cognitively enhancing. So you can come at things from like a light standpoint, from a scent standpoint. And if I could name one other thing that would be good for cognition, there's something else that I do, and you can get these devices. Here's an example of one. I know these are strange, but this stuff flies on the radar, so I figure why not talk about it. So there are these devices called PEMF devices, pulsed electromagnetic field devices. And there are many these days. This one's called an Oscapulse. There's another one called a Flex Pulse. But the cool thing I like about these is they generate frequencies, what are called pulsed electromagnetic field frequencies. And if I use a frequency of like, let's say, 100 hertz. 100 hertz is something like I was working on the kettlebells this morning and my shoulder's a little bit sore. I could take the 100 hertz frequency and put it on muscle injury. And it's great for muscle injuries. But you could also set it on a hertz frequency of, let's say, 10. And 10 hertz is actually the same frequency this headset is producing, right? It's like your alpha brainwave zone. So I could set that on my desk, not even touching my body, in 10 hertz instead of like 100 hertz mode, and use that for like enhancing cognition, keeping me like in that alpha brainwave zone. I could set it on 3 hertz for sleep, right? So it's kind of cool. Like a lot of these biohacks, this better living through science, I kind of like to blend them with more ancestral methods, right? So yeah, I might go outside. So I'm growing like Camellia sinensis, which is like this tea plant that I'll have in the morning as an alternative to coffee, and it's like green tea, right? Like and I can go out and pick that leaf, and I can make a tea out of it, and almost do like a more ancestral approach of like growing a plant that produces this leaf that enhances cognition. But I also, I don't mind, also buying a headset and sticking a probe up my nose to enhance that effect even more. So, as long as something isn't damaging to the body, like I embrace both these, modern science things that might make me look silly, but make me feel fantastic. And also these more ancestral practices of like, using rosemary and, different forms of green tea, for example.
I love that. That's awesome. I want to get back to exercise. And for people who aren't, ultra athletes, or they don't, they've never taken that track. They don't darken the door of a gym. That's me. What would you say is one of the most beneficial forms of exercise?
Well, what do you want to say? You want to say like for fat loss or general? I'll give you one that'll cover most of your bases, actually.
Okay, that's what I want.
Okay, so this would be for fat loss. This would be for muscle strength or for muscle maintenance, and this would also be for mitochondrial density or cardiovascular fitness, right? So the idea is wake up in the morning, and you're preferably in a fasted state, so that you're tapping into your body's own fat tissue. This is a strategy I use in myself and also in a lot of my clients who want to lose weight quickly. And you get caffeine into your system. It can be via coffee, it can be via green tea. Not a lot of calories, right? Like I'm not against the whole like bulletproof coffee approach, for example, but for this, just don't put butter and stuff in just basic green tea or basic coffee. So you got caffeine in your system, which is going to mobilize fatty acids and enhance your production of ketones, which will give you some energy. And then you want to go out and you want to do about 20 to 40 minutes of simple exercise in what's called your fat burning zone, which is just like a conversational aerobic zone. We're talking about like a yoga session or a walk in the sunshine with the dog or an easy hike or a very easy bike ride or something that's not stressful, something that's not going to produce a lot of cortisol. And the reason for that is twofold. Number one, you're teaching your body how to be a fat burning machine by keeping the intensity in your fat burning zone. And number two, if you go out in the morning in a fasted state and you do a CrossFit workout, you know what happens? You get what's called a compensatory eating response, meaning you have a big old bacon and eggs breakfast because you got that stressful workout in, right? Versus like this passive workout, you could still fast until lunch if you wanted to and be just fine. It wouldn't be that stressful for the body. And then you finish that up with cold exposure to enhance the conversion of adipose tissue into metabolically active tissue. My favorite for that is just like a cold shower, right? Like a 2-minute cold shower, right? So caffeine plus fat burning exercise plus the cold shower. Now, the part about muscle maintenance and the part about mitochondrial density and cardiovascular, this is kind of like the last little piece that'll toss in because you get out of the cold shower and you're cold, right? So you got to figure out a way to warm yourself up. So you choose any exercise you want. You do 2 minutes. 2 minutes is what it takes to actually produce lactic acid and kind of produce that slightly breathing hard type of approach. So I like burpees. I like kettlebell swings. I like, finding something heavy and picking it up and putting it down for 2 minutes as fast as you can. Pretty much anything. Anything goes for 2 minutes. So it's basically coffee, easy exercise, something cold, and then finish up with 2 minutes of something hard. And if you were to do that, and you could do that every morning and not overtrain, you do that just like every day, and you could switch up what you do every day, right? Like some mornings it could be green tea, some mornings it could be coffee, some mornings it could be a walk, some mornings it could be a bike ride, some mornings it could be a cold shower, some mornings it could be jumping in that lake by your house. And then some mornings it could be burpees and some mornings it could be kettlebell swings. But we're talking about, like 45 minutes total time investment. And if you were to do nothing else, I guarantee that alone would allow you to really kind of get that body that you're wanting, burn fat, build some fitness. And yeah, I mean, I'm still a fan of like playing sports and getting out on the tennis court or, shooting hoops every now and again or playing some golf or whatever. But from a pure fitness standpoint, that's going to cover like, 90% of your bases.
And you're doing that all on an empty stomach before you eat breakfast.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And sometimes I'll do that and not even, I'll be wrapped up with something like that by like 8:30 a.m., but you don't have to rush off to eat breakfast. Sometimes I'll skip breakfast. Sometimes I'll breakfast at 10. Sometimes I'll brunch, right? Like that's something I'll do often is I'll like kind of have like a mid-morning, like kind of sort of meal. And then I'll have a snack in the afternoon and then I'll have a big dinner. Right. So yeah, there's no hard and fast rule, but yeah, there's no need to also like just like rush off and stuff unless you're trying to be a bodybuilder or a professional athlete, in which case post-exercise nutrient replenishment becomes important. But in most cases, it's kind of overblown, the importance of just like finishing up a workout and rushing off to get your Jamba Juice or your protein shake or whatever.
Well, what I love about that is you're not talking about extreme exercise. I mean, you're talking about something that's purely, I walk every morning, and it's so enjoyable for me. And I have like a more intensive, like, yoga / weight class, but you're talking about like the walk could actually suffice in this sequence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's cool. Something anybody can do. That's awesome. Well, Ben, these are great tricks and hacks, and I just love them. And thank you for all the research that you do and proving that you do, because you're obviously like a human laboratory. So I think that's awesome. We all benefit as a result. So it's really good to have you here.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. I'm honored. And anything I can do for the folks listening or watching, just let me know. I'm easy to hunt down. If you just Google my name, you'll probably find my website, and you can always contact me through that. I'm sure Tricia
we'll put the links in the show notes.
Yeah,
for sure.
If anything I can help you out with, let me know. And yeah, my book's a good read. But yeah, I've got all sorts of other resources out there. So yeah, I love to help people with this stuff. So anything I can do, just keep me posted.
That's awesome. I have one parting question for you that I ask all my guests, and that's, what's your deepest hunger?
You mean like for food or just like in life?
No, it's more of a deeper question.
Okay, gotcha.
Your soul hunger.
I was gonna say that pizza that my wife makes with the thin crust and the squash and the blue cheese on top, but okay. So deepest hunger is to I'm a big fan of the very first thing that comes to mind. So I've got twin boys, and my deepest hunger is to raise two resilient, amazing young men who will grow up to make this world a better place.
I love that. That's beautiful. I'm sure they're on their way.
I think so. I hope so.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Ben. It's great to have you.
All right. Thanks, Tricia.
If you enjoyed this show and want to get free support, insider health info, exclusive invites to events, and more, visit healyourhunger.com.